The rain had stopped, but the sky over Willow Creek stayed dark and heavy. A crowd of people holding umbrellas stood around Thomas Harlan's grave. The sound of dirt falling on the coffin echoed through the quiet. I stood there, numb, my gloved hands gripping an umbrella I could hardly feel. After 49 years of marriage, there was nothing left to say, just silence and all the words we had never spoken. Before I dive into it, tell me where you're listening from. It helps to know someone out there gets it. People came up to me one by one with the same careful words of sympathy. Their voices blended into one low murmur. My daughter Becca stayed right beside me, her hand on my shoulder like she was afraid I might fall apart. When the final prayer ended, I turned to leave. That's when it happened. A faint vibration came from my purse. I froze. It was Tom's phone. I had put it there earlier, planning to give it to his lawyer after the service. The sound felt wrong in the middle of all the quiet crying and whispers. I hesitated, then pulled it out. The message on the screen made my breath stop. Don't look at the coffin. Look behind you. My heart started racing. Slowly, I turned around. Across the cemetery, near the edge of the trees, a man stood under a black umbrella. His face was thinner and older, but I knew him instantly. It was my son, Nate. He looked straight at me, raised one finger to his lips, shook his head, then turned and vanished behind the gravestones, swallowed by the rain. Becca's voice broke the silence. "Mom, are you okay?" I couldn't answer. Tom's phone slipped from my hand and landed on the wet grass. For just under 5 years, the whole world had believed my son was gone, lost, guilty, condemned. But as I stared into the mist where he had stood, one thought wouldn't leave me. Tom knew. He must have known all along. After the funeral, the house felt like a museum of things I couldn't touch. Tom's jacket still hung by the door, his slippers waited by the fireplace, and his books sat stacked neatly beside his chair. I moved through the rooms like a stranger in someone else's life, half expecting to hear his cough, his footsteps, or his voice. When night came, I couldn't sleep. I sat at his desk, staring at his phone, trying to understand that message. My heart still pounded from the sight of Nate's face. Was it really him? Or had the grief finally broken something inside me? I opened Tom's calendar, looking for any clue. That's when I saw the same entry repeated every month for just under 5 years. Maintenance barn. Our barn sat empty since the late 1990s. The roof sagged, the doors were warped, and Tom hadn't been strong enough to walk that far in years. What could he possibly have been maintaining out there? By midnight, I couldn't stand the question any longer. The wind cut across the yard as I walked toward the barn, flashlight shaking in my hand. The moonlight caught something shiny, a brand new padlock on the old wooden doors. My breath caught. Tom hadn't been maintaining anything. He had been hiding something. I ran back to the garage, grabbed his toolbox, and came back. The snap of the lock breaking sounded loud in the quiet. Inside, the air was thick with dust and the smell of old oil. My flashlight moved across the floor until it landed on a single cardboard box covered by a tarp. On top, in Tom's neat handwriting, were 3 words: Evidence Nate's case. My hands trembled as I opened it. Files, photographs, printed emails, everything carefully organized and labeled. On the first page of his notebook, written in ink that had bled at the edges, were the words that made my knees go weak. If you're reading this, Maggie, I ran out of time. Our son didn't steal anything. The flashlight flickered. In that narrow beam of light, I realized Tom had never stopped fighting for the truth. Even in death, he was still trying to protect us. Then I heard tires crunching on the gravel outside. I switched off the flashlight and held my breath. Through the cracks in the barn wall, headlights swept across the yard. A car door opened. Footsteps. then a voice I hadn't heard in just under 5 long years. "Mom, it's me." For a moment, everything went silent. The flashlight slipped from my hand and landed on the wet grass. When I turned, Nate stood in the doorway, soaked from the rain, his face thin, but his eyes sharp and alive. I wanted to run to him, but my legs wouldn't move. "You shouldn't be here," I whispered. "I didn't have a choice," he said. "They're watching the house." He waited until the lights outside went out, then stepped closer. "Why now, Nate, after all this time?" He glanced at the open box. "Because Dad's dead, and if he's gone, they'll come for you next." He told me everything, how he had discovered that Harrington Development Group was laundering money through fake accounts using his signature. When he confronted the CEO, Richard Vollmer, they threatened his wife and daughter. "Dad believed me," Nate said. "He started collecting proof, but they found out. He was the only one who could expose them." I felt the weight of his words settle in my chest. "You think they killed him?" "I know they did," Nate answered. "Laura Chen, Dad's lawyer, told me his prescription was changed 2 weeks before he died. The dosage was doubled. It wasn't an accident." The rain grew heavier outside, and thunder rolled across the hills. I looked at my son and saw the fear that had replaced the confidence people once criticized him for. He wasn't running anymore. He was fighting to survive. "Dad said you'd find this," he said, pointing to the box. "He wanted the truth to come from you." Tears stung my eyes. I reached out and touched his arm. "Then we finish what he started." He nodded. "But we have to move fast. They know Dad kept files here. If they think you have them—" He didn't finish the sentence. He didn't need to. Outside, an engine started again. Someone else was watching. The next morning, the house looked the same, but it no longer felt like mine. Every little sound made me jump. The refrigerator humming, the clock ticking, a car passing outside. Nate had left before dawn, promising to reach out when it was safe. He left a simple note on the kitchen table. "Trust no one." At 10 o'clock, there was a knock at the front door. Through the window, I saw a man in a dark suit holding up a badge. He looked calm and professional. "Mrs. Harlan, I'm Derek Ramsey, FBI. We're following up on an open case about your son." The badge looked real, but something about him felt wrong. His eyes kept scanning the room behind me. I tried to keep my voice steady. "I haven't seen Nate in years." He nodded and pulled out a small notebook. "If he contacts you, you must tell us right away. He's considered dangerous." "Dangerous?" I repeated, trying to sound surprised. "Yes, ma'am. For your own safety, you shouldn't go anywhere alone. Hand me this card. You can call me anytime." He left politely, but I watched his black sedan sit at the corner for several minutes before it finally drove away. My hands were still shaking when another, quieter knock came. A woman stood on the porch in a dripping raincoat, her eyes nervous. "Mrs. Harlan, my name is Laura Chen. I was your husband's attorney." Her voice dropped. "That man who just left, he's not FBI. He works for Harrington. They know Tom was investigating them. They think you have his files." Before I could answer, glass shattered in the kitchen. Bullets ripped through the window, splintering the cabinets. Laura grabbed my arm. "Run!" We raced out the back door, with gunfire chasing us into the rain. She didn't look back, and neither did I. That was the moment I understood. Tom's fight became my fight. I don't remember how long we ran. The world turned into rain, headlights, and pure fear. Laura led me through the trees, down an embankment, and into a narrow tunnel by the creek. We crouched in the dark until the sound of engines faded. When we finally came out, we were miles from home. Laura handed me a flip phone and a folded note. "If they find me," she said, breathing hard, "call this number. It belongs to someone who can finish what Tom started." Before I could ask who, a single gunshot cracked through the trees. Laura gasped and fell. I caught her. Blood spread across her shoulder. She pressed the phone into my hand and whispered, "Run, Hannah Whitaker." Then she went still. I ran. By morning, the news was everywhere. Elderly widow wanted for murder of local attorney. My picture was on every channel. They said I had lost my mind after my husband's death, killed his lawyer, and fled. My daughter Becca appeared on television, eyes red, begging me to turn myself in. The betrayal hurt worse than the fear. I hid in the basement of First Community Church. Pastor Samuel Whitaker, a man in his 70s with kind eyes, didn't ask questions. "You look like someone who has the truth to tell," he said. "Truth always has a place here." For 2 nights, I stayed hidden. On the 3rd night, I used the phone Laura had given me. The voice that answered was calm and clear. "This is Hannah Whitaker." I hesitated. "Mrs. Whitaker, Laura Chen gave me your name before she—"
Before she died. A pause. "Mrs. Harlan, I know who you are. I know about Harrington. If you have what I think you do, we need to meet somewhere public." "Where?" "Carver Park, by the fountain, tomorrow morning." The call ended. For the first time since Tom's funeral, I felt something new. Hope. The next morning, Carver Park was covered in thick fog. I arrived early, wearing a scarf and sunglasses, clutching the bag that held Tom's laptop. My hands wouldn't stop shaking. Hannah Whitaker arrived right on time, mid-30s, sharp features, moving with purpose. She sat beside me on the bench. "You brought it?" I nodded and handed her the laptop. "Everything Tom found is in there. Transfers, emails, photos. He was trying to clear Nate's name." Hannah opened it and started scrolling. Her eyes widened. "My God, this isn't just one company. These records link Harrington's CEO, Richard Vollmer, to half the county government." She looked up. "If this is real, you're sitting on the largest public corruption case in the state in the past 15 years. Before I could reply, a man in a dark jacket walked past us twice, too slowly, watching too closely. Hannah's voice dropped. "We're being watched. We need to split up." She took the laptop and promised to meet me later. I slipped into the park restroom, locked the stall, and stood on the toilet seat, barely breathing. A voice called my name, once, then closer. Minutes passed. When I finally opened the door, the park was empty. Hannah was gone. On the bench where she had been sitting, I found a small flash drive wrapped in tissue. I took it and walked away. That night, I returned to First Community Church. Pastor Whitaker was waiting. "Did you find what you needed?" "I found enough, but it's not over." He studied me for a moment, then nodded. "Then make it impossible for them to silence you." His words stayed with me. By dawn, I knew exactly what I had to do. If they wanted me hidden, I would make myself seen. If they wanted my voice gone, I would speak louder. By noon the next day, the basement of First Community Church had become a makeshift press room. Pastor Whitaker had called every journalist he knew, and the word spread quickly. Cameras, microphones, and reporters filled the small space. I stood behind the old wooden podium. The flash drive from Hannah was warm in my hand. I wasn't shaking anymore. "My name is Margaret Harlan. 5 days ago, I buried my husband. The next day, I found proof that his death was not an accident." Every eye in the room was on me. The lights were bright, but for the first time, I didn't want to hide. I told them everything. How Tom had uncovered a network of bribery and money laundering run by Harrington's CEO, Richard Vollmer. How local officials and even a judge had been paid to protect the company. How my son Nate had been framed to keep the truth buried. They called me delusional. They called my husband paranoid. But grief doesn't make you crazy. It makes you see what others refuse to see. As I spoke, the doors burst open. Derek Ramsey, the fake FBI agent, stormed in with several men behind him. "This ends now, Mrs. Harlan." Reporters turned their cameras toward him. Ramsey moved forward. "You're under arrest." But before he could reach me, a strong voice cut through the noise. "Drop your weapon, Ramsey." Real FBI agents poured into the basement, guns drawn. The lead agent, Rachel Torres, stepped forward with her badge raised. Derek Ramsey, you are under arrest for impersonating a federal officer and obstruction of justice. The cameras caught every second. The room exploded with flashes and shouts. Agent Torres turned to me, her voice calm. Mrs. Harlan, you're safe now. We've been investigating this for months. Your press conference gave us exactly what we needed. For the first time in days, I let out the breath I had been holding. Tom's truth had finally come to light. In the weeks that followed, the headlines told the rest of the story. Harrington executives arrested in a major corruption scandal. County officials and judge implicated. False fraud charges against Nate Harlan dismissed. The same town that once whispered about me now spoke my name with respect. Nate's record was cleared. The FBI confirmed that the evidence Tom had collected exposed a $45 to $50 million network of bribery, fraud, and murder. A few days later, Nate came home. He stood in the doorway of the farmhouse as morning light filled the rooms. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he smiled, a tired, genuine smile. "It's over, Mom." I took his hand. "No," I said softly. "It's just beginning." Now, months later, the house feels alive again. Becca visits every weekend with her daughter Sophie, whose laughter fills every room. Nate works with a nonprofit that investigates financial crimes. Sometimes he laughs and says, "Guess I got that from Dad." Every morning, I walk out to the garden where Tom used to spend his Sundays. The roses he planted had nearly died while everything fell apart, but they are blooming again, strong and beautiful. I kneel by his grave and tell him about the trial, about Nate's freedom, and how Sophie smiles just like he did. "You were right, Tom," I whispered. "Truth doesn't die. It just waits for someone brave enough to carry it." When I go back inside, the house no longer feels haunted. It feels restored, not just by justice, but by family and love. If there's one thing I've learned, it's this. Courage doesn't always roar. Sometimes it's the quiet choice to keep standing when the world wants you silent.